Hello, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. I'm Briggs Zanati, and today I am joined by Harold Muliati. Leslie could not make it. Normally this isn't our on day, but today we're doing a special. But you can see Leslie's website at www.learnappeal.org.uk. It is a great charity. Please check it out and support them. They really need the help. And Harold is our video producer. Today he's co-hosting. And we also have with us Jodi Crawford. She is an analytics expert, a data person. She knows a lot about kind of a cross between an IT and an instructional design and training person. She's done a lot of work, and definitely data is big with her, and she does stuff with data most people don't do. So here we go.
More and more people are working remotely every day. Your company may already be remote. You may be new to working remotely, whether you're a worker or a manager. Working remotely has some challenges and some very good points to it as well. In our training, we'll make sure that you learn how to work remotely, how to build trust, how to do all the things that make remote working successful. And we'll also talk about some of the pitfalls and what to avoid. Working remotely for workers and managers. It's our new course on Udemy. Thanks.
This show is sponsored by Relay Corporation. Digital learning development, media development, corporate video, management consulting, and more. Visit us at www.relate.com. Thanks.
And we are back, and in that center position of power, as we like to call it, that would be you, Jodi. We've got Jodi Crawford. She is a longtime data analytics person. She's been a project manager. You're doing something pretty interesting right now. What's your current position?
I work on the information governance team at Westfield. So I'm doing some process management. And my big initiative this year is we're working on increasing our data literacy in the company.
It's great. But you've got a long background with data. You're really good at data. I just so you guys know, we have worked for Jodi in the past when she used to be with GE Capital a long time ago, and we've known Jodi for quite a while. And I'll tell you, you've always been considered by us as one of the smartest cookies out there. You're very smart when it comes to
wow.
Well, actually, you are. You're very smart at what you've done with your work, with your job, and the things you do. You're one of the few, and I say this in all sincerity, we've met a lot of people in the LMS world who actually took LMS data and actually analyzed it and looked at trends and looked at things and performance and improvement. Not a lot of people do that. They usually do a checkoff. Done. Yeah, not much else goes on. In your days working with LMSs and with data, what was your role for the most part?
Well, I got started in measuring and evaluating training. Gosh, would have been around 1999, 2000, somewhere in that vicinity. And we had a dedicated team that it was small, but we had a dedicated team at that point that was doing it. And I find that's usually when it gets done the best because, if you've got people who are focused on that. But yeah, we did for our we focused mainly on our major programs, which at that point were our onboarding training programs, our customer service onboarding, and our collections onboarding. And we did all 4 levels of Kirkpatrick's model at that point in time. So we did kind of the standard reaction surveys, and we had assessments. We called them assessments because, the 4-letter word test just scares people. So we weren't allowed to call them tests. And we actually used call review data and things for behavior to see if they were following the call models that we were teaching them in the training. And then we looked at results depending on, what their role was. We looked at different results that mattered to the business in terms of that. So my job was really to put those together, dashboard it, say where I thought we needed to beef up the training a little bit. So we took it past just making charts and graphs for people. We actually made recommendations about what we should do with the training.
And that's
that was a pretty step forward for us at that point at GE.
Well, you guys also did something that was different. A lot of companies don't do this. You had a data warehouse too. So things would go from the LMS to the data warehouse, which gave you a lot of ability to analyze that data, to sort, to do things with it.
And we had easy access to the call review data, the business data that we needed in order to do the level 3 and level 4 kind of measurements. So that was really important. We weren't dependent on getting that from people.
Do you find
of my first?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of my first projects where we really started to get into looking at it more closely was we felt like on the customer service side, I actually did analysis, did some correlation analysis between how people were scoring on the assessments, the level 2s that they were taking in training, and then how they were doing in terms of the level 3 and 4 measures that we were looking at. And we found, what I found was there was very slight correlation, but it wasn't statistically significant. So we ended up redesigning all of I ended up redesigning all of our level 2s. And that improved the predictability of them. So, that was a big project. It was a pretty big accomplishment at that point in time, to say how we're measuring people as to whether they've learned what they need to learn isn't getting the job done, because they're going out and no matter how they score on that, we're not seeing better performance from people who score higher. So obviously our tests aren't predictive.
What sort of changes did you need to make to the program to get more correlation between the level 2 and the behavior and the results?
What it boils down to is the way they were originally written, the ones that we did the analysis on, they were very knowledge focused, regurgitate facts for me kind of testing. And what I did was I took it much more into scenario based, and we started using things like screenshots. At that point in time, our customer service reps were working on an old mainframe system. So they had to know dozens of screens just to, handle customer inquiries. So the ability to know where to navigate and, find the information that they needed so they could answer customer questions or give customers information they needed was really critically important. And the tests just weren't testing them on that very much. So we started using things like screenshots, and we actually developed a test engine that let us do that, because at the time, anything that was available commercially to buy couldn't really do that. I mean, now that stuff's available, but we actually developed our own so we'd ask a question that we'd have maybe 10 different screenshots for them to pick from. So they had to know where to navigate to get the answer to the question that they need, so they can answer the question. So taking it more into the realm of this is what you actually have to do on the job really helped that situation a lot.
Yeah. And we have a comment from our audience. Douglas Marlowe says, the missing link, a data warehouse. Most companies have no idea what to do with the data.
Yeah, that's so true.
It is a challenge.
It is true. And most companies don't think about it. The bigger companies might, smaller companies don't. And a lot of the learning departments don't know what a data warehouse is. So you have, issues between IT and data and what people do with it. And as a result, we've recommended that to many clients throughout the years, and they look at us like, data warehouse? We already have a warehouse. No, not a real warehouse. We're talking about data warehouse.
Virtual warehouse. Yeah.
Yep. One time, I'll tell you just a funny little aside. We went to visit a company that specialized in making carbon nanotubes. These are very small nanotubes. And at one point, I asked a very stupid question. I thought it was a smart one at the moment, but I realized within seconds that was a dumb question. So I asked the chief scientist there, where do you warehouse the nanotubes? And she pulls out a matchbox. I went, got it. They're that small. They are nanoparticles. They're very, very teeny.
Very, very tiny.
They're very tiny. I thought she was laughing when she showed it to us. I went, got it. Yep, sorry. But it is interesting because what you can get from a data warehouse is that offline data that can now really, you can manipulate and massage it in so many different ways without affecting online systems. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. And I think sometimes it's a hard sell to people because they're like, why would we want to have two sets of the data? And it's like, well, you don't want to report against your live data. Because that's a bad idea for a whole host of reasons, which we won't even bother to go into. But, it's like, it's the same, it's important, and it lets you do transformations, it lets you do a lot of things with your data. Right. We're actually in the process right now of rolling out a data catalog, which is going to make it even easier for people in the company to find what data we have and what's the quality of it and where is it located. So
now, did you also have an IT? Did you have an IT background at one point?
No.
Okay, you just picked it up.
Yeah, I just have always been a little tech savvy and learned a lot.
Now, you were telling me
osmosis.
Something. Yeah, you were telling me something the other day. You just got your master's in, is it user experience and design?
User experience design, yeah.
User experience design. That's cool. Mm-hmm. So you went back to school to do that.
I did. I'd actually started it. Actually, at the time, it was information architecture and knowledge management was the program.
Nice.
And I started it, and back at that time, it was 100% classroom. And I was on a big project for work, and I got to the point where I was traveling so much I couldn't make it to class, so I had to stop. And then I just finally picked it up again, and they changed the program at this point. So
that's pretty good. Now, what does that talk about? What's the main focus of that master's?
User experience design is all about, really, you can get involved in anything that humans interact with. So product design, website design, application design, even things like museums will hire user experience designers to help figure out how can we lay out this museum so that people can interact with it and get the maximum benefit from it and things like that. So you really can get involved in a host of things, but what it boils down to is understanding who the users are, what their needs are, and designing the experience so that they get the maximum, they have the maximum attainment of their goals. Sound familiar?
In a way, it's almost like
it's a lot like instructional design. Instructional design really is user experience design.
It sounds to me like there's almost like a crossover between, it's sort of like instructional design and almost in a way like civic engineering too, where it's, you're trying to engineer the people's experience so that they're getting what they're supposed to out of it.
Yeah, understanding the goal and helping them achieve the goal with maximum effectiveness is what it's about.
No, that's pretty good. And what did you find that in that particular degree that you liked and that you didn't like that much?
Well, I mean, the serious background in instructional design was the key thing, and I've been doing it a lot. I do a lot of we use SharePoint extensively at the company, and so I've been responsible for a lot of the SharePoint. So, I feel like that's a lot of what I was doing anyway, is just trying to figure out what's the best way to set this up so that people can get out of it what they need and do what they need. And so that was a major selling point. It was also 100% online, so it certainly good. Was nice after the pandemic struck. We were barely affected. We were affected a little bit. We had to change up. Can't go out and do guerrilla usability testing when you can't go, be near people. So they had to change up some of the activities for some of the classes, but we really weren't negatively affected at all by the fact that we were in lockdown for a while.
That's pretty good. Yeah. When you talk about instructional design and data and all that, most instructional designers don't talk much about data. For example, they tend to focus more on curriculum development versus writing specific or really worrying about user interface design or user experience. That's one of the common misnomers out there, that a lot of people confuse UX for UI, so the user experience versus the user interface. There's a little bit of both in them, but user experience is nasty because a lot of people don't realize. I've given this analogy before. You're going to the airport. You've got to take a flight. You're on American Airlines or whatever airlines you want. You're on an airlines and you get to the airport and they don't treat you well at the parking lot. Okay, so you had a bad parking experience. Then you get into the airport and it's crowded. There's huge lines. So you're kind of ticked off because you've had to wait a long time. You finally get on the plane and they keep you on the runway for an hour because of some issue. And then the pilot does a beautiful job flying. Everybody's happy. You get there actually on time and life is good. So what do? You give the airline a horrible rating because of all the things that happened ahead of that. And that's where user experience is so tough, because there's so many factors that go into that user experience. Let's say, for example, in insurance, you've got brokers and agents and other things that work in that. And at any point, something could break down, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities for error, as we used to say in my Six Sigma days. But you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people do confuse UX and UI. Well, and especially when I say, tell people user experience design, they're like, oh, so they think it's all about what's the look and feel, of the thing. And it's like, it's not that we're not thinking about look and feel, but that's not what we're designing. We're designing the process. We're designing literally the experience that people are going through. So most of the time, the design work we do is really, we're doing wireframes of, hey, the page has to have these things on it. You make it look, you send it off to somebody else usually to make it look pretty. It depends. Some people are doing, soup to nuts. They're doing the whole thing. But, depend if you're specialized, you're really thinking about what's the design process and what do we have to have on the page to make it effective. And then we'll let somebody else worry about what it looks like.
Yep. I was reading, I was watching a podcast last night, a guy named Matt Wade, and he was talking that it sounds like Microsoft is doing a major overhaul of look and feel. They're making it more consistent between SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, and pretty much all the apps. So they're taking that user experience and user interface into account seriously, because people are complaining, why is it so different between SharePoint and Outlook and Access or whatever? They're pretty different interfaces. So they're going to standardize. They're adding dark modes to things to lessen the eye impact of very bright screens. So they're making a concerted effort, and they're probably one of many vendors starting to say, we've got to make some changes. I know Apple's been trying to do that. And that whole user, how often do you find that the user experience goes beyond the software to the actual experience working with people and everything else?
Oh, I think, especially depends on the role. I mean, for most people, they may not even be thinking as much about the website as if they have to call into customer service. What's the experience they're having there?
Yep.
Are they feeling heard? Are they feeling listened to? Are they getting answers to the questions that they have? Are they getting the help they need in a timely manner? That's going to be far more important than what your website looks like. But I think it's a challenge. Depending on, it really does depend on who you're talking about and the role you're talking about. But it's I don't know, it's fascinating. I find people endlessly fascinating, so it's always fascinating, and I love the usability aspect of it. I love doing usability testing, and I think one assignment I had, I was talking to one of my professor, and I were interacting because he had, given me comments on an assignment and everything. And I was like, I think I'm successful. I think I'm good at usability testing because I don't take it personally.
Good.
I don't take it personally. That's not working for you. Good. I want to know that because we want to make it better, because we want it to work for you. It's not about, I really love what I did and I don't want to hear anything negative about it. So being open to that feedback and taking it and doing something with it to improve the user experience is the key thing.
It's funny you bring that up. I used to be in the IT world. I was a program analyst, systems analyst. Before ever getting into training, I kind of inherited training in a couple of places where I was a VP of IT, and they said, well, who's going to do training? Hey, you look like you don't have anything better to do, huh? And I wound up having training. I thought, gee, thanks. But I enjoyed it. I liked it. And I liked media. I didn't know I liked media in those days. And so it became one of those things. And, the IT mentality was always, I was sort of like the anti-IT person sometimes because I really believed in customer service. And you would hear programmers say, well, you don't like it, too bad. No, it doesn't work that way. We have to work with people. You have to make it usable. And that was in the old days. Programmers weren't always the friendliest, especially system programmers. They weren't the friendliest to people. They were rather, a little too Asperger's sometimes. And so you had to work through.
And they hate to document anything.
They don't want to. No, in fact, you'd be surprised. I knew some programmers. They were system programmers. These are the guys who work on internal systems, that operating systems kind of things. And they would make modifications and write wrong comments on purpose so that nobody would be able to fix it later. And you just go, and those are the kind of behaviors you don't want to encourage. But there was a lot. I'm talking years ago. Yeah. It's gotten a lot better. Yeah. I think it's a little more accessible to everybody right now, and it's gotten a little more commonplace. So you don't see as much of that. A little bit probably, but not as much.
No, not nearly as much as back, 20 years ago. No,
yep.
It's much better situation now. But I think Agile might be helping a bit because that short cycle of do stuff and get feedback, I think in some ways it's helping that situation somewhat.
Yeah, Agile. Well, the nice thing about Agile is it's quick. It's quick. In the old days, a lot of people would work with, let's say, Microsoft Project, even in the new days. You work with Project and you spend more time managing Microsoft Project than you did the actual project. It was an issue, and it took forever. And so for certain projects, they were great. If you're doing construction, it's probably better not to rush construction too much. You don't want buildings falling down or cracking or whatever else. But if you're doing what we do, I can count on one hand how many projects we've actually had to manage using a project manager because they weren't that long. Some of them were maybe 6-month projects or a 1-year project. Then it probably helps to have a good task project management software. But other than that, the project software tends to be overkill for most type things that are happening, at least in the learning world. A lot of projects are here, quick, 2 weeks, 1 month. And that you can do with quick task lists and figure out what dependencies are. You don't have 20 people on it. You've got 1 or 2, maybe 3, depending on how big the teams are. Or you've got different types of people. You may have graphic artists. You may have voiceover talent. You may have audio editors. You may have video producers. Then you have maybe more elements. But a lot of times, and in most companies internally, you've got 1 or 2 people doing everything, which puts the burden on 1 or 2 people.
Right. Well, I was thinking about what you were saying about how most instructional designers aren't really thinking about numbers and things. It is a shame. I do think that there is a tendency to think that the learning stops when the training class is over or the WBT is finished or whatever the case may be. And if you're not thinking about how that's going to transition them back into the real world, out onto the floor and providing that support that they need, whether it's getting the leaders, their leaders set up ahead of time to provide the support or, providing, some kind of ongoing support tools. I think it's it's a real shame that we don't think about it. And I think from a measurement perspective, I think a lot of times we lament that we don't do more level 3 or level 4, but I'd say focus on level 2 first. Most level 2s, when I take a course, like we have compliance courses and all those things that we have to take that we buy and everything, and I take them and I go, yeah, I'm not impressed by your level 2 here, because it's very, again, can you just regurgitate a little bit of knowledge that you have? But the more you can make them apply it, the more you design your training to be as close to the real world as you can make it, and then test them like they're going to be tested when they get out on the floor, and can they figure it out? Can they apply what they learned? You're going to get better results. You're going to have better prepared people who are better prepared to do their job.
Well, one thing that rarely happens in e-learning, I know we've tried in many, many companies and we get batted down every single time. Let people make mistakes in the training, in the assessments, in simulations, because if not, they won't know what to do when they really hit a mistake. And no mistakes. That happens all the time. People we want to keep the training positive. It's not positive. It's realistic. It's not negative to make mistakes. It's realistic. And it's something that people have a hard time digesting, that if you don't allow people for example, pilots, when they go in flight simulators, the real flight simulators, they get to crash, they get to get uncontrolled spins. They have to go through everything, because if it happens in real life and they're not prepared, it's over. And we don't take that approach in business for some odd reason, that making a mistake will make people learn.
Not only do they learn from mistakes, mistakes are important. Frustration is an important part of learning too.
Yeah.
It's okay to be frustrated. You should be a little bit frustrated when you're trying to learn something new and you're not quite getting it yet. As long as you get to the point where you figure it out and you relieve that frustration, you don't want to leave them frustrated. But it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to make mistakes and fail. And, flight simulators are one of the examples I always use about the consequences of misclassification. What your level 2 should be doing is classifying, is somebody really prepared to go do that task in the real world, or aren't they?
Yeah.
If you say somebody's prepared when they really aren't, well, I'm pretty lucky. I've worked in financial services, pretty much my entire career. It wasn't life or death. I mean, not that bad things couldn't happen, but a flight simulator, if you say somebody's good to go on a plane, they're good to fly a plane, and they're not, hundreds of people could die.
That's right.
So that's pretty bad consequences for misclassifying them as ready when they're not. So that's why airlines spend, I don't know what those things cost, but I'm sure they're wretchedly expensive.
They're in the millions.
Those flight simulators got to be really expensive.
Well, it's interesting.
But that's the key thing about really figuring out. It's okay if they fail. It's okay if they fail the test. What are you going to do when they do? If they don't quite get past the cutoff score, what are you going to do about that? What's the remediation you're going to do?
Yeah, and if they fail consistently, they don't fly. It's that simple. One thing interesting in the airline is we did some projects on this years ago, and that's what they call CRM, which is crew resource management. And what CRM really comes down to is, how do you communicate with each other? That is what avoids accidents more than anything else. How does the pilot communicate with a co-pilot, with a flight attendant, with everybody on board, what they have to do, how they communicate with towers, with everything else. And if you think about it in business, it's just as important. Communication, how we communicate with different departments, with different people. How do you communicate with the clients? It's all part of that same thing. And financial companies or insurance companies can have all sorts of problems if things go out wrong. Statements go out wrong, things aren't paid, things are applied to accounts, blah, blah, blah. And you can have all sorts of problems, and you have lawsuits sometimes. So the same idea, it's not maybe life or death, but it can get pretty emotional sometimes.
It was interesting. I read an article for one of my classes, and it talked about several airplane crashes and that had very different outcomes. And one of them was the flight, the Miracle on the Hudson. which was kind of near and dear to my heart because at the time that happened, I was working for Bank of America, and there were 24 Bank of America employees on that flight. So
interesting.
So I kind of knew that there were colleagues of mine that were potentially impacted, and we didn't know, early on, we didn't know what the situation was or whether they were all okay. And but they talked about and how Captain Sullenberger always reiterated it wasn't just me. The flight attendants did their job well. My co-pilot did his job well. The police and the fire department, like all the rescue people who came, and the ferry boat drivers who they saw a plane and they went, okay, route's gone. I got to go help the plane that's in the water now. All of those people combined and just allowing them, if everybody's doing their job well and knows what they're supposed to do, you end up with a fantastic result versus some other ones where, the results were not so good. So, I thought it was fascinating case studies that they had.
Yeah, and Captain Sully was also a trainer. He was actually a flight trainer. So he actually put into effect what he knew. So it's what he trained people to do. That was actually pretty. I haven't seen the movie. I heard the movie was actually quite good.
The movie is fantastic.
I've got to see that.
It really is fantastic because what we didn't know behind the scenes was, he and the pilot went through 18 months of the movie condenses it, of course.
Yeah.
But they went through 18 months of possibly losing their job, losing their pensions. They were being blamed until they proved that no, the engines were dead. They made the right call.
I thought they got hit by.
It's like he was being heralded as a hero. He was on David Letterman. Like we were all just blown away by what he had accomplished.
Yeah.
And he was going behind the scenes, and you wouldn't have known it from how he was on when you saw him on television.
Didn't the engines get hit? Didn't they get hit by birds or ducks or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, geese took out 2 engines.
And they only have 2.
Something like 2,800 feet. They were only at 2,800 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And normally.
No, I recommend the movie. Tom Hanks is wonderful, of course. He always is. But it's a really good movie, and you learn a lot of that was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible what happened there. Well, Jodi, we are pretty much just about out of time. That was fun.
Okay.
I'd love to have you on again and talk a little bit more about what you're doing and things that you've done. You've got a lot of experience, and it's always fun sharing, with people like you of the things you do. You're real world. You're out there doing it, and and we appreciate you coming on. And I really want to hear more about what you're doing with the UX and all that as you get more into it, because that also sounds fun. What you're doing is something that you can apply pretty readily.
Yeah, hopefully be applying a lot of it with our data literacy initiative. So maybe you can come back when we've got that a little further along. And
I'd love to hear about that. That'd be fun. Well, again, Jodi, I really appreciate you joining us today and taking time out of your day. I know you're busy, and sharing. That'll be great. We'll have this up. This has actually been going live on LinkedIn and Facebook at the same time, and then we will upload the video to YouTube a little bit later for all those who want to look at it there. And so you'll be able to see it whenever you want or wherever you want. It'll be in all those places. And if you want to get a hold of Jodi, you can do that through LinkedIn or comment on the video, and she'll probably be out there too. So have a good one, everyone. Thanks for watching. And Jodi, again, thanks for your time and great seeing you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everyone.
Great to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.